Claire had always believed that love would be enough. When she married Michael 8 years ago, she thought they were building something lasting, something that would survive time, work, and routine. He was steady, dependable, and kind. He wasn't the type to bring her flowers every week or whisper poetry into her ear, but in the beginning, she didn't need that. What mattered then was his loyalty, his calm nature, and the way he made her feel safe. But as years passed, that same safety began to feel like silence. Their life in Seattle looked perfect to everyone else. They had a cozy white house, 2 cars, a dog named Milo, and a steady rhythm that looked like happiness from a distance. But inside that house, Claire felt something missing, something she couldn't name out loud. Michael was still kind, still reliable, but his eyes no longer searched for her when she entered a room. Their conversations were polite, practical, and short. Did you pay the bills? What time's your meeting? Can you pick up dog food? They were partners in function, but not in feeling. Each morning followed the same pattern. Michael left early for work, leaving a kiss on her forehead, quick, distracted, half-hearted. Claire would stand by the window with her coffee, watching him drive away, feeling a strange mix of love and loneliness. She wasn't angry at him. She was just tired of being invisible. The man who once couldn't stop looking at her now barely noticed when she changed her hair or wore a new dress. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that he had stopped seeing her. One Saturday morning, Claire woke early, determined to reconnect. She planned breakfast, pancakes, fresh berries, his favorite coffee, and wore the yellow sundress he once loved. When Michael came downstairs, she smiled brightly, hoping for a spark. "Good morning," she said softly. He looked up, smiled faintly, and kissed her cheek. "Morning, honey. Can't stay long. Big project due." Her heart sank. She tried to hide it, nodding as he grabbed his laptop bag. "We were going to walk by the lake today," she reminded him gently. "I know. I'm sorry," he said, already halfway out the door. "Next weekend, I promise." Then the door closed and his car disappeared down the street. Claire stood in the kitchen, staring at the table she'd set for 2. The pancakes grew cold, the coffee lost its steam, and she realized she was waiting for something that wasn't coming back, at least not the way it used to be, later that day. She decided to go for the lake walk alone. The path was quiet except for the soft sound of water and the laughter of children nearby. That's when she heard a familiar voice call her name. Claire. She turned and saw Daniel, her college friend, someone she hadn't seen in almost 10 years. He looked older, but his eyes were still the same, warm, kind, curious. He was jogging, and when he stopped to talk, the conversation felt natural, effortless. They walked together by the lake, talking about everything and nothing. Their old campus days. The professors they used to hate, how life had turned out so differently than they'd expected. Daniel told her about his divorce, how he'd moved back to Seattle to start over. There was something about the way he spoke, open, honest, not afraid to be vulnerable, that made Claire feel seen again. He asked her about her art, something Michael hadn't mentioned in years. "Do you still paint?" he asked. She laughed quietly. "I used to. I guess I ran out of inspiration." Daniel smiled. "You never ran out. You just stopped looking for it." That line stayed with her long after they said goodbye. When she got home, she sat by the window with her cup of tea, thinking about that sentence. Stop looking for it. It wasn't just about painting. It was about everything. She'd stopped looking for joy, for warmth, for herself. That night, when Michael came home, she told him about running into Daniel. He nodded absently, scrolling through his phone. "That's nice," he said, not even looking up. She studied his face, wondering if he even noticed how far apart they'd become. "Do you ever think we've changed?" she asked softly. He finally looked at her, confused. "Changed? What do you mean?" She shook her head and smiled faintly. "Never mind." But days went by, and Claire began to see Daniel more often. Sometimes by accident, sometimes not. He'd wave at her from across the coffee shop, stop to chat in the grocery store, or text her a funny photo from their college days. It started small, innocent, but each conversation made her feel lighter, more alive. For the first time in years, someone was paying attention to her laughter, her thoughts, her dreams. One afternoon, they met for coffee. "You seem different," Daniel said. "More like the Claire I remember." She smiled shyly. "Maybe you're just remembering me wrong." He shook his head. "No, you used to walk into a room and light it up. I'm just glad to see some of that light again." His words hit her in a place she didn't know was still tender. She wanted to tell him how lonely she'd been, how empty her days felt, how invisible she'd become in her own marriage. But she didn't. Instead, she just said, "It's been a long time since someone noticed." That evening, when she got home, Michael was on the couch watching a show. "How was your day?" he asked casually. "Good," she said, sitting beside him. He nodded, eyes still on the screen. The distance between them felt physical now, like an invisible wall neither of them knew how to break. The next week, Daniel called her. "You sounded sad yesterday," he said. "I'm fine," she replied quickly. "Just tired." But he didn't believe her. "Claire, talk to me," he said gently. "You can, you know." And she did. The words poured out her loneliness, her fear of fading, her guilt for feeling empty, even in a stable marriage. Daniel didn't judge. He just listened. When she was done, he said quietly, "You're not wrong for wanting to feel alive. You just forgot that you deserve it." That night, Claire lay in bed beside Michael, staring at the ceiling. His slow breathing beside her felt like a reminder of how separate they'd become. She thought about Daniel's words, "You deserve it." It wasn't about another man. It was about remembering herself. But part of her knew she was standing too close to a line she shouldn't cross. The following Sunday, it rained. The kind of slow, steady rain that makes everything feel softer and sadder. Daniel texted her coffee, just to talk. She hesitated, then typed back, "Okay." She told herself it was harmless. Just two friends catching up. When she walked into the cafe, Daniel was there, sitting by the window, his face lighting up when he saw her. "You came," he said warmly. She smiled, trying to ignore the way her heart raced. They talked for hours about life, regrets, hope. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was intimate. When they said goodbye, Daniel touched her hand lightly. "You're stronger than you think," he said. Walking home, Claire couldn't stop replaying that moment. It wasn't about the touch. It was about how it made her feel seen. She knew she was standing at a dangerous edge, but for the first time in years, she felt something other than emptiness. That night, she looked at Michael sleeping peacefully beside her and whispered into the dark, "When did we stop being us?" Outside, the rain kept falling, soft and endless, like the ache she carried in her heart. And though she didn't know it yet, that ache was about to change everything. The days after that rainy Sunday felt different for Claire. Something in her had shifted. The gray routine of her marriage seemed heavier, and yet somewhere beneath it, she felt a small spark she hadn't felt in years. A quiet reminder that she was still alive. Daniel's kindness had stirred something she couldn't quite name. She told herself it was friendship, comfort, maybe nostalgia. But deep down, she knew there was more to it. Michael, as always, was busy. His projects at work had doubled, and his late nights became normal. He didn't notice her silence or the faraway look in her eyes. They still had dinner together, still shared the same couch, but the warmth between them was gone. Claire tried to talk to him a few times, but every attempt ended with a polite nod or a distracted, "We'll figure it out." One evening, after another quiet dinner, she walked out onto the porch with a cup of tea. The air smelled like rain again, soft and calm. Her phone buzzed. It was Daniel. "Are you okay? You seemed quiet last time." She hesitated, staring at the screen. Then she typed back, "I'm fine. Just thinking too much, I guess." He replied almost instantly. "You don't have to pretend with me." That message, simple, genuine, broke something inside her. She didn't realize how much she needed to hear that. That night, they talked for hours over the phone. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. They talked about old songs, movies they used to love, the strange ways adulthood changes people. There was nothing inappropriate, just two people remembering what connection felt like. But as they spoke, Claire felt her heart moving toward something she wasn't ready to face. The next morning, Michael left early again. He kissed her on the forehead out of habit and said, "Don't wait up tonight, I'll be late." She nodded, pretending not to care. But when the door closed, the house felt too big, too quiet. She poured herself another cup of coffee and sat by the window, thinking about Daniel. By afternoon, she couldn't resist. She texted him, "Coffee later." He replied, "You read my mind." They met at a small cafe tucked in the corner of downtown, quiet, warm, smelling of cinnamon and roasted beans. When Daniel saw her, he smiled in that way that made her forget the noise around them. "You look lighter," he said. She laughed softly. "Maybe it's the coffee." They talked for hours again about everything, his new photography work, her half-finished art pieces, the loneliness that hides behind daily life. There was no flirting, no promises, just understanding. But that understanding was dangerous, because it filled the space where her marriage had gone silent. When it started to get dark, Daniel walked her to her car. The street lights glowed softly around them. She turned to say goodbye, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was charged. Daniel finally said, "I don't want to make things complicated for you." "You're not," she said quietly. "You're just reminding me what it's like to feel heard." Smiled sadly. "I hope that's a good thing." "It is," she whispered. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She lay awake thinking about every word, every glance. She wasn't doing anything wrong, at least not yet, but the emotional pull was strong. She knew she should pull back, but she didn't want to. Because for the first time in years, she felt seen, valued, alive. Over the next few weeks, she and Daniel saw each other often. Walks at the park, long talks at the cafe, quiet moments that felt innocent but carried an unspoken weight. She told him about her art again, and he encouraged her to start painting. One day, he brought her a small set of brushes and a canvas. "For when you remember who you are," he said. It was such a simple gift, but it made her tear up. "You don't know how much this means to me," she whispered. "I think I do." He replied softly. That evening, she set up her paints again. The smell of acrylics filled the room, and she felt like herself for the first time in years. When Michael came home, he noticed the easel in the corner. "You're painting again?" he asked, sounding surprised. She nodded. "Yeah, I missed it." He smiled faintly. "That's good." Then he went back to checking his emails. That short exchange made her realize something painful. Michael wasn't cruel or careless. He had just stopped trying. Somewhere along the years, their marriage had turned into a pattern of comfort and silence. And she had accepted it until Daniel reminded her not to. One afternoon, while shopping for groceries, Claire ran into a mutual friend of hers and Michael's. "You two still doing date nights?" The friend asked cheerfully. Claire froze. "Date nights," she repeated. The friend laughed. "You used to do them every month. You made the rest of us jealous?" Claire smiled awkwardly. "Oh, that was a long time ago." That night, she brought it up to Michael. "Remember when we used to go out, just us?" she asked. He looked up from his laptop. "Yeah, that was fun. We should do it again." He hesitated. "Maybe next month?" "Things are crazy at work right now." She tried to hide her disappointment. "Sure," she said softly. After he went to bed, Claire sat alone in the living room. Her phone buzzed. Daniel again. "Still awake?" She stared at the message for a long moment before replying, "Yeah, just can't sleep. Want to talk?" he asked, and just like that, she found herself on the phone again, laughing quietly, sharing stories. He told her about a trip he wanted to take to the coast, the ocean, the cliffs, the sound of the waves. "You'd love it there," he said. "It's peaceful. Feels like the world stops for a while." She imagined it, standing by the ocean, the wind in her hair, the sound of waves instead of silence. "Maybe someday," she said. Danielle hesitated. "Maybe sooner than someday." There was a pause, one filled with meaning they both understood but didn't name. "Daniel," she began softly, We shouldn't. I know, he said quickly. I just care about you too, she whispered. That night, Claire cried quietly into her pillow. Not because she had done something wrong, but because she was standing between two versions of herself, the one who had settled for safety and the one who longed for something more. The next morning, Michael noticed her red eyes. You okay? He asked. She nodded. Just didn't sleep well. He smiled faintly. You worry too much. Then he kissed her forehead and left for work. His kiss felt like a habit, not a gesture. And Claire realized she couldn't live on habits anymore. That afternoon, she drove to Daniel's studio, a small, sunlit space filled with photos and canvases. When he saw her, he smiled, surprised. Didn't expect to see you today. I didn't expect to come, she admitted. He offered her coffee. And they talked, but the air between them felt heavier, more fragile. After a long silence, Daniel said, Claire, if this is too much, tell me to stop. She looked at him, her eyes soft but steady. You've done nothing wrong. You've just reminded me what I was missing. Daniel sighed. And that's the problem, isn't it? Because I don't want to be the reason you break something that still matters. Her voice trembled. I don't even know if it does matter anymore. That confession hung in the air. Neither of them moved, but both felt the pull, not just of attraction, but of emotional need, of two people who had spent too long being unseen. Claire stood, tears filling her eyes. I should go, she whispered. Daniel nodded. I'll be here if you need to talk. When she drove home, she could barely see through the blur of tears. The city lights shimmered through the windshield, each one reflecting a question she didn't know how to answer. That night, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at her reflection, tired, older, but somehow softer too. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't keep living halfway. Between truth and longing, as she turned off the light and walked toward the bedroom, she glanced at Michael sleeping soundly, unaware of the storm inside her heart, and for the first time in years, Claire whispered a prayer, not for love, not for forgiveness, but for clarity. Because something had to change, something always does. The days that followed were heavy for Claire. She moved through her home like a shadow, doing all the usual things, cooking, cleaning, smiling when needed. But inside, her heart was full of noise. Every thought pulled her in two directions. One side told her to fix her marriage, to remember the vows she had made. The other whispered that she deserved to feel alive again. Michael stayed the same, polite, calm, but distant. He didn't notice that she barely spoke at dinner or that her laughter was gone again. One night, while he worked late in his office, she stood outside the door listening to the sound of his typing. She realized that even though they lived under the same roof, they had become strangers. The next morning, she sat in her car outside Daniel's studio, gripping the steering wheel. She hadn't planned to go, but her heart had led her there. When he saw her walk in, he put down his camera, his eyes soft but guarded. I wasn't sure you'd come back, he said. I wasn't sure either, she admitted. But I needed to talk. He nodded, waiting. I can't keep doing this, she said quietly. I can't live between two worlds. I feel guilty all the time, even when we're just talking. But I also can't pretend that what I feel isn't real. Daniel took a deep breath. I don't want to hurt you, Claire. You don't owe me anything, but you deserve to be happy wherever that is. She looked at him, tears forming. You've been the only one who made me feel like I mattered. That's not something I can forget. Daniel stepped closer, his voice gentle. Then don't forget. Just make sure that whatever choice you make, it's yours. Those words stayed with her. That night, Claire sat at the kitchen table, staring at the clock. It was almost midnight when Michael walked in. He looked exhausted. You're still up? He asked. I wanted to talk, she said. He set his briefcase down and sat across from her. About what? Us, he sighed, rubbing his temples. Claire, can this wait until morning? I've had a long day. No, she said firmly. It can't. He looked at her, surprised by her tone. Okay, what's going on? Her hands trembled slightly. but her voice was steady. We don't talk anymore. We don't laugh. We don't even see each other. I keep waiting for something to change, but it never does. Michael frowned. You think I don't care? I've been working so hard for us. I know you have, she said softly. But in all that work, you lost sight of me. Of us. He leaned back, silent. I'm not blaming you, she continued. I let it happen too. I stopped fighting for what we had. But I can't live like this anymore. Like we're just two people sharing a house. Michael looked at her for a long time, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, Is there someone else? The question hit her hard. She looked away, unable to lie. There's someone who reminded me what it's like to be seen. Michael's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. So, that's it. You found someone new? Tears filled her eyes. No. I found myself because of him, yes. But this isn't about him. It's about us, or what's left of us. The room was quiet, except for the ticking clock. Finally, Michael said, I didn't realize how far apart we'd grown. Neither did I, she whispered. He sighed deeply. So what now? I don't know, she said honestly. But we need space. I need space. He nodded slowly, his voice heavy. If that's what you need, I'll give it to you. The next morning, Claire packed a small bag. Michael watched silently as she gathered a few clothes, her paintbrushes, and a sketchbook. When she reached the door, he said quietly, I never meant to make you feel alone. I know, she said softly, and I never stopped caring about you. She left before the tears could fall. Claire rented a small apartment near the lake, quiet, bright, and peaceful. She spent her mornings painting and her evenings walking by the water. The silence that once scared her now felt comforting. She didn't rush to call Daniel. She needed to understand herself first, to see if what she felt for him was real or just a reflection of her emptiness. Weeks passed. She slowly found rhythm in her days. She smiled more, laughed more. She started selling small paintings online, something she hadn't imagined doing before. Her world, though small, began to feel hers again. Then one afternoon, while setting up a canvas, she heard a knock. When she opened the door, Daniel stood there, holding a cup of coffee and a nervous smile. I wasn't sure if you wanted to see me, he said. I wasn't sure either, she replied, but she smiled faintly. Come in. Looked around the small apartment. You've made it beautiful. It's peaceful, she said. I needed that. They talked for a while, not about the past, but about life. His new work, her art, small things that made them laugh. When he was about to leave, Daniel turned to her. You seem free, he said softly. I think I am, she said, for the first time in a long time. He nodded, his eyes warm but sad. I'm glad. You deserve it. She looked at him, realizing something she hadn't before. You helped me find the strength to change. But now I need to walk the rest of the way alone. Daniel smiled gently. Then I'll let you. They hugged not as lovers, but as two people grateful for what they had shared. When he left, Claire stood by the window, watching the sunlight touch the lake. For the first time, she didn't feel torn. She felt whole. A few weeks later, Michael called. His voice was calm, softer than she remembered. I've been thinking a lot, he said. About us. So have I, she replied. I took some time off work, he said. I realized I've been running from things instead of fixing them. I don't want to lose you, Claire. She hesitated. I don't want to lose what we were. But I can't go back to how things were. I don't want that either, he said. I want to start over if you'll let me. His voice was sincere, and for the first time in years. She heard the man she had fallen in love with. Maybe we can try, she said softly. But slowly. He agreed. Over the next few months, they met for lunch, went on walks, and talked. Really talked. There were no promises, just effort. Michael listened more, laughed more, and showed up in ways he hadn't before. And Claire, in turn, forgave slowly, letting the walls between them fall one by one. One evening, as they sat by the lake, the same one near her apartment, Michael said, You seem different. I am, she said with a small smile. I had to lose myself to remember who I was." He nodded thoughtfully. "I think I needed that wake-up call too." The sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky golden. They sat quietly, watching the colors fade. There was no perfect ending, no promises of forever, just two people choosing to try again, wiser than before. Claire still painted, still spent time alone, still cherished her freedom. But she also let Michael back into her world piece by piece. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real this time, built not on comfort, but on honesty. Months later, she met Daniel again by chance at a small art show. He looked happy, peaceful even. "Your work's beautiful," he said. "Thank you," she replied, smiling. "I owe part of it to you." Kay laughed softly. "Just don't forget the part you did yourself." They talked for a bit, then said goodbye. No sadness, no longing. It's quiet respect. As Claire watched him walk away, she felt nothing but gratitude. He had entered her life when she needed a mirror. And now she had become her own reflection. That night, when she returned home, Michael was waiting with dinner on the table. He grinned. "I tried to cook." "No promises." She laughed, sitting beside him. "I'll take effort over perfection any day." And for the first time in a long time, the house felt warm again, not because everything was fixed, but because both of them had chosen to grow instead of run as they talked and laughed over the unevenly cooked meal. Claire realized that love wasn't about never breaking. It was about learning how to rebuild together. And sometimes alone first. She had found herself, found peace, and now maybe found love again. Not the kind that sweeps you away, but the kind that stays when the storm is over. And in that quiet evening light, Claire finally knew she was home.